Welcome to WOW. Welcome to WOW on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever else we stream in. Glad you're here. I'm just praying that we don't have the excitement that we had last week. Right, so before we step into chapter 2, I just want to take a minute to zoom out. You know I do this every week, and don't get bored. Right? Right, because I want to zoom out just for a minute, because it's easier to forget when we're where we are in the bigger picture and where we're trying to go with this, right? So when we started this journey, if you remember, all that time ago, right, we started in the book of Acts. And Acts was showing us something very specific to us, right? It was showing us how the church was started, how the gospel spread, and how ordinary people began carrying an extraordinary message. And then, if you remember, after Acts, we moved into Ephesians. And Ephesians effectively shifted the camera for us, right? It wasn't asking how does the church start, but it was really asking what does the church become? And our identity, our unity, and what it looks like to grow up in Christ. And now we're in Philippians, right? And Philippians is going to ask us yet another question. What does it look like when a formed church, because if you remember, Philippi was formed for about 10 years, what does it look when a formed church faces real pressure? And how it still holds together. What holds a Christian life steady for us, right? And when our life, right, doesn't cooperate, and I promise you that our life doesn't always cooperate with us, right? So that's what Paul is writing into here. And I just wanted to let you know that after Philippians, right, we're going to move on into some other letters that Paul wrote to leaders, right? We're going to go into 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, and then we're going to go into Titus, where he spoke specifically to leaders. And then there's letters about what a maturing church needs, right, in order to stay healthy, right? Because it's easy for us not to stay healthy, for us to go wandering all over the place, right? And eventually, right, we're going to start to see how the early church lived out their faith, right? And in a world that started to become increasingly hostile to it. Really, Mike? So we're going to go, from then we're going to move into 1 Peter, and then we'll go into James, right? And so the reality of being an exile and having a faith that actually works in everyday life for us. So we're on a journey, right? This is what the journey is. Acts is how it started. Ephesians, what it meant to become. Philippians, how it holds up under some kind of pressure. So now we... Who is that? Leslie? Well, you're good. And tonight, okay, I'm going to have to start saying, right at the beginning of every meeting, please turn your cell phones, put them onto silent. And tonight we're going to pick up in chapter 2 of Philippians, right? But before we step into it, let's look at the ground that Paul has already laid inside this letter. He doesn't start the letter by telling them what they need to do. He starts by reminding them who they were, right? And who God has been to them. And then the instructions are going to come later, that they grow out of something. So look what he's already done in chapter 1. He opened with gratitude, thankful for a church that walked with him. He anchored them in what God had already started among them, and reminding them God finishes, right, what he starts. That's important to understand. He's always going to finish what he starts. And then he showed them what it looks like when God is still moving. Even when nothing around us seems to be moving, right? You know, when we get that, we hit that impasse, we hit those block roads, and you say, God, are you really doing anything here? You ever run into those walls? Right. And he was addressing that. And then he went even deeper. Because it's one thing to see God at work when life is cooperating right with us, but it's another thing to trust him with it when life isn't cooperating. And Paul, what he did was he opened his whole life up to them, right? He told them, right, and this sounds like a broken record. He was in chains. He was uncertain about the outcome. He was even dealing with people inside the church who were using his situation to benefit themselves. But what he had done, what he showed us, that he had already settled something inside, right? His life was no longer, connected or tied to any outcomes, right? His life was tied to Christ. To me, remember that one line, to me, living for Christ and dying is even better. I don't know about the dying part, but I can live for Christ, right? I don't think I'm quite ready for the dying part. That one line reoriented everything for him as a man of God. And by the end of chapter 1, he started to turn it outward for us, right? We said, what did he say? Live as citizens of heaven. Stand together. Don't be intimidated. But don't be surprised when your walk with Christ will cost you something. Because somewhere along the time, there's always going to be a cost somewhere, right? So this is the ground that he was setting up for us. Because now he's going to take all of that and he's going to really press into something very specific for us in chapter 2. Not just how do I live, but how do we live with each other? Because you know what families are like, right? They just love each other to death, right? With the emphasis to death. So here's the thing, though. It's possible to say the right things about Christ, believe the right things about Christ, even go through real pressure for Christ, and still not treat people the way he treated people. Do you hear that? And Paul knows that about us, right? So now he's going to talk to them about something they may not have seen coming. Not what they believe, because I think that's been reinforced to them time and time again, but he's now going to start to speak about how we see each other. Okay. I think, and I'm speaking for myself, but I think it's true for most of us, right, that we don't always think of ourselves as self-focused, right? If you were to ask me straight up and come up to me, Wayne, are you selfish? What do you think my answer would be? No. Right? It would be a categorically no. No, I'm not. If you know me, I'm generous, right, when I can be. I'm generous with my time, with my resources, and with my money, whatever it is. I'm generous, right? I give to people. I care about people deeply. And I'm always trying to do the right thing. But if I'm going to be really honest with you, most of my day still revolves around one person. Can you guess who that would be? Me. Right? It's about what I need to get done. What am I worried about? Right? What's bothering me? Do you ever come across that? Because there's something bothering me. What I'm hoping will work out for me. None of that is really wrong. You understand that? None of that's wrong. The reality is that's just humans being humans, right? That's what we do. But when life gets pressured, when something doesn't go my way, when things disappoint me, that's when things start to show up in my life, right? Maybe sometimes I get defensive. In certain instances, I'll withdraw from you in a minute, right? I've been doing that a lot lately with some people in my life, just withdraw, right? Maybe we start comparing ourselves with each other. Does anybody compare with others? None of you do, or you do? Yeah, right, we compare, right? That's human nature to do that. And here's the other thing. We tend to protect ourselves, right? I'm very good at protecting me. Certainly when I feel like that I'm being challenged, not challenged in leadership, but I mean just challenged, right? If you come at me, I protect myself, man. And normally I do that by withdrawal, right? Just check out, not going to deal with this, right? And suddenly, what happens is that the person next to me, whether it's family members, whether it's members in the church body together, my spouse, whatever it is, what I do then, I start to see them in a different way. They become an obstacle to me, maybe, or a threat. A threat, yeah. What about this one? Maybe it's a mirror reflecting back on me, right? Because normally, if I've got an issue with you, most of the time it's something in me, right, that I'm not liking myself, right? You're just giving it back to me, and I'm like, I don't like that. Maybe it's a mirror that I don't want to look into to see what's really going on with Wayne, right? And what Paul is going to do now, he's going to speak right into that. He's not going to do it from a distance, but he's going to do it right from experience, right? Because Paul has watched churches fall apart over this very thing right here. And he doesn't want Philippi to do that one because, you know, this church has been 10 years in the making, right? These are friends of his. This is something that the people in there he loves. He's seen this grow and mature. He's encouraged them. They've encouraged him. And he doesn't want to see them fall apart either. And I wish I had just done this before I came here. You know what I'm doing, right? I'm going to just keep talking amongst yourselves while I just fold my papers up, right, a little bit so I can fold them. And by the way, I've tried finger licking, I've tried pieces of things, I've tried everything, and it still doesn't work. Okay, what I'm going to do is that we're going to do Philippians 2, 1-4. We don't need to go to 5. Okay, so we're going to do 1-4, but we're going to start with 1. Let's go to verse 1. Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ, any comfort from his love, any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? So you notice, right, that Paul opens here with 4 questions. So notice what he's doing. He's not commanding anything yet. He's appealing to them through questions, right? What he's doing, he's asking them to remember something here. Each of those questions that he's asking points back to something they've already experienced, right? Encouragement from Christ, comfort from his love, fellowship in the Spirit, and tenderness and compassion. That's not hypothetical questions he's asking them. These are questions he's asking them because they've felt it, they've received it, they've lived it in their lives, right? And 2 of the words that he uses in here are worth slowing down on, right? So there's encouragement, that's the first word. The Greek word for that, and I'm going to really mash this one up, because Greek is a really easy language to speak, right? Paraklesis, right? Paraklesis. It's the root word that Jesus used for the Holy Spirit in the Gospel of John. Huh? How do you spell it? Do you want the Greek spelling or do you want the phonetic spelling? The Greek spelling is Paraklesis. Paraklesis, right? Emphasis on the clay. I've got the notations here, right? I put the phonetic spelling right next to the word. And I still mashed it up. Huh? That was a UK version. That was the UK version. Do you want? I'll give you the American version now, y'all. Yeah, you've got to start with y'all. Paraklesis, y'all. Oh my gosh. So, as I said, that's the same root word that Jesus used for the Holy Spirit in the Gospel of John, right? So when Jesus told his disciples he was going to send another comforter, another helper, that's the same word, family, that he used, right? So when Paul asks, is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ, he's not talking about a pep talk rally, right? You used to have pep rallies, don't you? I used to go to be at my daughter's pep rallies when it came to volleyball or something, man, like, rah, rah, woo, right? It isn't one of those. He's not talking about a pep talk. What he's talking about is the kind of presence that comes alongside you when you need it the most, right? And then the next word, and I'm going to really make a mess of this word as well because it's another Greek word, right? It's the word for fellowship, right? It is called koinonia. Emphasis on ni. Koinonia. What did you say? Koinonia, right? Okay. Say that again. And K, it is spelt Kainonia. Go on, Lisa. Tell me how it's said. Oh, you've been studying Greek, haven't you? Yes, you have. Koinonia, right? Is that it? There we go. Koinonia. There you go. So we tend to hear that word, right, today and think of it maybe coffee after service, right? Friendly conversations that we're going to have, being around other believers. But it's not that kind of fellowship that he's talking about. It's stronger than that. It means a shared life, right? A real partnership together. A going through something together and not just being in the same room. I can be in the same room with you, that's not fellowship. It's when we are together, we're closely knit, and we're sharing things together, our life together. That's what it is, right? And here's what's beautiful to me. It's the same word he used back in chapter 1, when he thanked them for being his partners in the gospel from day one. That's the same word he said, right? So Paul is calling them back to the opening that he had by basically saying, that partnership I already thanked you for, but that's what I'm now asking you to extend to each other. So I've thanked you for it, but now you have to extend that to each other. That's what I'm asking you to do, right? So Paul, what he's essentially saying, right, if any of this is true for you, then we'll hear what I'm about to say next. So he's setting it up with the 4 questions, and he says, now you need to understand what I'm going to say next, because he's anchoring the instruction before he gives it. Because what's coming isn't a new rule, right? We tend to look at them as rules that we have to abide by, right? But he's not doing that. What he's trying to give to us is what's the natural response to what they've already been given. So, I think it's verse 2, please. Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another and working together with one mind and purpose. So now he's telling them what he wants them to do, right? So he basically set them up with the questions, and when after he asked those kind of questions, he said, but this is now what I want you to do. And it's not about performance, right? It's about getting them to be united as one body here, right? That is the goal. 4 things stack up here for me, right? Agreeing wholeheartedly. Can we agree wholeheartedly? 100% of the time? No. How about loving one another? Can we do that? Working together. Can we work together? There's Amy going like this. Maybe not so sure. How about this one? Can we have one mind and one purpose? That's the repeated theme. He already touched on it at the end of chapter 1, right? When he says, standing together with one spirit and one purpose, right? So now what he's trying to do, he's taking that and he's trying to press it in harder. Because it's one thing to stand together against pressure from the other outside, and it's another thing to stay together when there is friction between you. There's never any friction between you, is there? Did you just shake your head and say no? Which church am I in? I know there's friction sometimes, right? But what Paul is knowing, right, about this, he knows that it's when that kind of friction starts to happen within the body, that's when it starts to break, where unity starts to break, right? And this is the truth. This is been my experience in churches, and I've been around a lot of churches, right? Churches don't typically fall apart from outside pressure being brought to bear on them, right? That's very rare. They fall apart from within. Maybe it's a small offense that never gets resolved, okay? Maybe it's comparisons that we have with one another that quietly grow. Maybe it's that preferences that we have that become positions that we must stand on, right? Have you noticed that sometimes? No? Wow. What happens before long, something that used to feel like family slowly starts to feel divided. It's very subtle when it comes. I've watched it time and time again in many churches. So what Paul is saying in the middle of all this Make this the thing that you have to protect. Protect this at all costs, right? Because what holds you together isn't shared opinions. Because I'm going to tell you, like, if this is a church of what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word I'm looking for, right? It's basically, it isn't about shared opinion, it's about shared love, right? Because we're all going to have different opinions. We're not always going to agree with each other, right? At all kinds of level. But it is about a shared love, a shared purpose, and a shared life together in here. That's what we do. See, I made a note here. Unity does not survive on agreement. It survives on love. And that's the truth. We will never agree on everything. But we can be united in love. Love for self, love for each other, and love for them outside, right? So let's move to verse 3. And I'm only going to do verse 4. So this is going to be pretty short, right? Shortish. Okay, so verse 3. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Thinking of others is better than yourselves. So now, Paul is becoming very direct, right? He's not softening the language here now, right? He names two things, right, that will quietly tear unity apart if you let it. And this sometimes is how I feel, right? He names these two things, and typically they're both about me, right? Selfish ambition is the first one, right? That's when my forward motion that I'm taking, it becomes more important than your well-being, right? When I'm competing, even when I'm saying I'm not competing. When I'm measuring, even when I look ever so humble, right? When I want to win, even in relationships that aren't really supposed to be a contest, right? The other thing he says, it talks about vain conceit, right? Or in other words, trying to impress others. That's about when my life starts to become quietly performing for an audience, right? And I think we're all guilty of this, and I've been guilty of it at one time or another, right? I'm not saying I'm guilty of it now, but I've been guilty of this at one point or another, right? When I'm wanting to be noticed, when I'm wanting to be respected, right? When I want you to look at me and me to be seen in a certain kind of way. And the reason that Paul lists those two things together is that they usually work hand in hand together, right? One is about getting ahead. The other is about being seen to get ahead, right? And here's something that's very important that we need to understand, and that most of us miss this when we read this, right? Paul is not just naming personal vices for us. He's naming, right, for them, the way the city around them operated every day around them, the church in Philippi, right? Because you've got to remember, Philippi was what? It was a Roman colony. And Roman culture was built on certain things like status, rank, honor, public reputation. So in those days in Philippi, that's how you survived, right? That's how you got ahead. That's how you made sure that your family in Philippi was taken care of. The culture was you climbed, you positioned, you made sure that people noticed you. And I wish I could remember that there was, in England, right, we had a series on TV that looked at these kind of machinations that happened around one of the Caesars, right? Like, it wasn't Julius, but it was around one of the emperors at the time. And it all looked about this politic and everybody trying to stab each other in the back, literally, right? And that's the way it was. So when Paul is naming selfish ambition and about wanting to impress others, right, he's not just pointing out a bad habit. He's pointing at the water they were swimming in every single day of their lives, right? That's what they did. He's telling them, don't let the way that this city runs become the way that you run, right? Just because it happens out there doesn't mean that it happens in here. That's what he's saying. And I think that we're not that much different, right? We can have our own version of this, right? Let me throw some things out of you and see if this resonates with any of you. Careers that we climb. Yeah? Images that we create for ourselves, right? Platforms that we build, metaphorically and literally, right? The quiet comparisons that we run in our head with each other. And over time, if you let it, that becomes the water that we ourselves swim in on a daily basis. And when we start doing that, we stop noticing it. It becomes the norm. That's what we do. And both of these, right, which is selfish ambition and vain conceit, do the same thing. They turn your attention inward, right? Me, right? And we stop actually seeing the people around us. Then what Paul does, Paul is good here, right? Because then he suddenly names the opposite, right? Humility. I don't know what that word means for you, but I think that word has a baggage attached to it, right? And I think that for the people in Philippi, it had a baggage for them too, for different reasons. I'm going to need help with this one, Lisa. The word Paul uses here, and I'm going to do it right now, it's called tapenophrosune. Huh? Can't help me, right? Tapenophrosune, right? Emphasis on the su, so it's su, not so, right? So tapenophrosune, right? For the Romans, right, that Greek word was actually an insult in Roman culture, because it meant something like lowly, servile, right? Servile, beneath dignity. It was the kind of word that you would never want used against you or applied to you, right? So no Roman would have worn that word, whatever that word says here, right, as a badge of honor on their sleeves, right? They wouldn't have done that. Because to them, it was closer to weakness than it was to virtue. So then when Christianity comes along and takes that word, right, it turns it into one of the highest things a person can become. So in other words, the insult to them now becomes the calling to them at the same time, right? And that tells you something about how different this way of life really is. Excuse me. Because what the world around them looked down on, Paul is now holding up as what Christ actually looks like, right? Humbleness, humility. So when we hear the word humility, we hear it through centuries of it being a virtue now. But at that time, it wasn't a virtue. So they were hearing it fresh, and it became jarring to them, right? We hear it and think about thinking less of yourself, putting yourself down, being a doormat. But that's not what Paul means here. Biblical humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking about yourself less. It's not about lowering yourself. It's taking your eyes off yourself long enough, right, to actually notice somebody else. And then Paul said something for them that was probably pretty hard for them to hear. Thinking of others as better than yourselves. That's hard, right? But what it means here is not better morally, not more important, but worth considering first worth placing ahead of your own position. I think that when we hear that, that cuts against everything we ever believe, right? Or everything that we've ever been brought up to believe. Because I think that the human condition says something like that every part of us wants to protect our place, protect our position. We want to protect our view, we want to protect our time, we want to protect our agenda, we even want to protect our opinion, right? And what does Paul say? Lay it down. Not because your needs don't matter, because they do matter, right? But because the truth is you don't need to keep fighting for them, right? That's the real truth. As I said, humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking about yourself less, right? That's hard. Because we've been conditioned, the human conditioning that we've had is to always think about self, put ourselves first, always, right? And that's hard to get out of that mindset. So let's jump to verse 4, please. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. For me, this is where Paul lands everything right here. You notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, look out for yourself. Which is what we tend to do, right? Because looking out for yourself is not the point. He's not asking you to neglect your own life, right? This is where the confusion comes in. He says, don't look out only for your interests. There's more. It's a shift, not an erasure, right? It's the difference between a life that only sees itself and a life that has expanded enough to see somebody else. That's the whole thing right there. That's the whole move, right? And the word he uses, interest, matters, right? It means what? Pay attention, notice, care. To actually see the person in front of you. How many times do we interact with people and we don't see them? Right? We just don't see the real them. We see them through the lens of our own conditioning, right? The lens of the constructs that we've been taught or built upon. That's how we normally see them. We have this filter on, right? We need to take it off, right? To see them about what they're actually carrying, what they're walking through. Because people walk through stuff. What they really need, what they really need that they haven't said out loud. That carries discernment, right? To see them where they're really at. To see beyond the persona that they're presenting, right? To beyond the bravado that they're putting, all the walls that they've built in front of us, right? You know that I've tried to build walls so many times, right? So you can't see me, so that I can protect me, but God just knocks them down, right? Thankfully, I've had people in my life who have really looked at me and said, nah, click. We want to see the real you, right? Because there are people who truly care, who truly care. I think most of us, at one point or another, walk past that nearly every day of our life. Because what we're doing was too busy with ourselves most of the time, right? That's not because we're bad people, y'all. That's because our own inner world sometimes is too loud, right? What Paul is really saying to us, quieten that inner world down enough, right? Long enough to see. Because I understand this, because if I start to see people clearly, if I really see them, who they really are, the real ones, right? See them how they really are, what happens is I start to treat them differently. Because what we do is that we treat people out of the filter that we have, right? Out of those prejudices, those biases, That's what we do. And what he's saying is we don't do that. We've got to look beyond that. And I think that when we individually start to look at people in that way, then I think that if we all do that individually, then at a community level, I really believe that's when it starts to look like Christ. A note here said that you start to look like Christ when you stop only looking at yourself, but looking at others as they truly are. So what Paul is doing here, man, I'm really moving through this pretty quick. Do you want me to slow down even more? Or are you all ready to get back to bed? I'm ready for my bed. I was up really early this morning. What Paul is doing here is very simple, yet very hard. He's asking a formed community of believers, that's what Philippi is. It's been a formed community of believers for 10 years, right? To look at honestly at themselves, right? Not at the big sins in their life, and not at the obvious things that's going wrong, but at the quiet, self-focused posture, right, that most of us don't even notice. Right? We've got to look beyond where I want my own way. How many of us want our own way sometimes? Right? How often do you want to be recognized, right? Acknowledged at least, right? Maybe where I want to see things moving in the direction that I want them to move in. How about that one, right? Because that positioning or that posturing, right, if it's not addressed, is what eventually will start to fracture a community together, right? And I said, not from the outside, but it normally happens from within. So if Christ has actually, so what Paul is saying is that if Christ has actually done something in you, if he's truly done something in you, then the way that you start to see each other starts to change too. Not because I'm coming up here and saying you have to, or I'm telling you to, or because Paul says that you have to, right? Because it's the natural overflow of what you've already been receiving in your life. Christ pouring into you has a natural overflow. We are the filters and the blocks that stop that from overflow, right? So I'm going to ask you, I was going to say one final question, but I actually noted I said 3 questions. So final questions. I think it's worth sitting with these, right? Because I want it to be reflective. First question I think you need to ask yourself is that where in my life, right now, am I still centered on me? Isn't there a country song like me, I? That's it, right? The one that died, right? The country singer? Who? Toby Keith, right, yep. Is my life still centered on me? Where am I protecting within myself something I really should be laying down? I know those who went on Emmaus were asked these same kind of questions, right? What are we holding on to that we need to lay down, right? Because that was all about surrender, right? Surrendering to the deeper call of Christ within you. And then the question that you need to ask yourselves, who around me, right? And it's not just in your immediate family, not your husband or your spouse or your family, but who around me collectively, either in this body of believers or in the workplace around you or in the outside of this place, who around you am I not really seeing? Really seeing? I know this to be true, right? I can't look like Christ while I'm only looking at myself. I have come to the end. Any questions? Any thoughts? I can't look like Christ while I'm only looking at myself. Because if I'm looking at me, I can't see Christ. I can't.
Some lessons within the church, too, that apply to this so vividly in my mind. The fact that you also, within the church body, don't want to think of yourself as a super Christian. There's no, it's so vitally important as new converts come into the flock that we treat them as equals and you know, not play the I'm a super Christian
Right.
on this pedestal. And I think he's talking directly to his church there. I think that applies in that vein as well as with that, you know, look at ourselves, look at how we are to the world, but also within the church. We should, you know, I'm the holiest one here, you
Right,
know, and all
right.
that. Because it gets nowhere.
Right.
And no one would get converted if that was the case.
Right. What Mike is talking about is about being that there are no super Christians. We're all believers together, right? That's in its essence, right? That what we tend to do is that when new believers come in, that we don't put ourselves on pedestals, right? And that make this look that we're better than, because at the end of the day, we're no better than, no less than. We're just the same. We're no better than, we're no less than. We're just the same, right? Which is really the true spirit, the spirit of anonymity, right? We're no better than, we're no less than, right? We're just the same in here, right? Now, it doesn't mean that we don't, leaders are going to be leaders, because that just naturally happens, right? But we're supposed to be building up and encouraging one another to love and good works, right? So, yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Anybody else got something? No? Okay, you ready to go?
This has come up to me. When you help someone and you've gotten so frustrated because you help them so much and they're not helping themselves. I noticed, AA, Al-Anon thing I learned years ago. But I'm totally nice to this person, but I just really am very aggravated with this person because they will not get their life together.
I'm really struggling to hear you, Kay, so.
How are you, really?
Yes.
I said I'm struggling with someone that we've helped over and over again,
Right?
but they are not trying to get their life together. They keep saying, I'm sorry, I'm blah, 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 and I'm like, I don't want to hear it.
Okay.
So I really didn't want to talk to them today. I didn't even want to look at them today, you know? And I know it's not right, but I'm just so tired of helping someone when they will not help themselves.
Right. So it's about helping somebody when they can't help themselves, right? There's a very careful balance there, right, about how we enable people, right?
She won't.
Won't help themselves, right? Yeah.
She won't, and it just frustrates me.
Okay, right.
And I've talked to her.
But you have no control over power over anybody else but yourself, right? And how you see anybody that's all you do, right? So what you still have to do, it doesn't matter what they're doing, right? You must still look at them with love, no matter what, right?
I do love them, but I don't like them.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's hard to,
Yeah,
feel like I still need to help her, but I don't want to.
Right.
I'm enabling her.
that's, because sometimes that's a fine line between enabling and actually helping, right? But the way that we see them and the eyes that we must look at them through is how Christ looks at them, right? Christ doesn't see anything like that. He just loves. Man, when he loved me when I was doing some stuff that everybody around me was saying, oh my gosh, what is he doing, right? Really? But huh? What did he say, man? Right? Oh, that's okay, right? Right? But you know what happens is that I'm really thankful that if it's not down, because if it's down to Wayne, you're all going to lose. None of you are going to get into heaven, right? right? Because that's my bias, right? What I have to do is see through the eyes of Christ, all of you, right? Through compassion, through love, through empathy, through understanding, right? And with patience, long suffering sometimes with some of you, right? That's how I got to look at that, right? I've got to see beyond what you are, right?
I think Christ gave a good example of that, and that he went to the synagogue over and over and over.
Yes, he did.
Trying to talk to the leaders
Yes.
of the Jewish religion, trying to convince them that there was a better way.
Right.
No, they treated him terribly, but he kept going back.
Yep. That's our job, to keep going back, to love unconditionally and unashamedly for anybody, right? That's all we do. We just love them, right? I'm doing that right now. I'm loving somebody unconditionally and unashamedly through their bad choices, right? That's all I can do. I do not agree with their choices. I can't change their choices because at the end of the day, I'm only responsible for me and the choices I make. And so what I do is I love unashamedly and I love unconditionally.
You can set boundaries.
I set boundaries, absolutely.
Love them,
And love them.
and you can give them to God.
And give them to God, absolutely, 100%. And I do set boundaries, right? That's the key thing, right? I set boundaries because I love me more than I love the situation, right? I have to set boundaries. Anybody else? Always, right? Always. But see, it's out the abundance of the life that pours into me, right? So the moment that when I get up in the morning, I'm already getting my life right, set up with God, right? I'm up early. I'm reading scripture. I'm looking at devotionals. I'm pouring in, allowing Christ to pour into me. And I hope that if the more of that pours in, it's the natural overflow. Because if you get a jug, right, and you keep pouring into it, what happens? It eventually overflows, right? And so I'm allowing God to pour love into me, and then there's the natural outflow of love that I hope permeates around the people around me, right? I don't have to agree with everything that you do, but I'm going to love you through it anyway. Yeah? Anything else?
That's great.
Thank you. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Done. All right, let's close in prayer. Father, you see what's in us more clearly than we see it in ourselves. You see where we're still trying to protect ourselves, where we're still trying to chase recognition, where we're still centering on our own interests without even realizing it. Father, please open our eyes, not to just what you're doing, but to the people who are around us. Help us see them. Help us see them as you see them. Help us place them ahead of ourselves, not out of any obligation, but out of what you've already done within us. And form something between